There's a stretch of ocean between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico that, for decades, has carried a reputation no other patch of water on Earth can quite match. Ships vanish there, planes disappear without a trace, and for over half a century, people have asked the same unsettling question: what's actually happening inside the Bermuda Triangle? The story most people know starts on December 5th, 1945, when 5 Navy torpedo bombers took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, for a routine training exercise. 14 men were on board across the 5 aircraft. Partway through the flight, something went wrong. The lead pilot reported that his compass wasn't working. Then he reported that both of his compasses had failed. Radio transmissions between the planes grew increasingly confused, the flight seemingly unsure of its own position or which direction led back to land. Then, the flight went silent. A rescue plane, carrying 13 more crew members, was sent out to search for them. That plane also vanished and was never found. Despite one of the largest air and sea searches in American history, no wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft was ever recovered. 14 men from Flight 19, plus 13 more aboard the rescue plane, were gone without a trace. It's a genuinely tragic story, and it became the founding legend of the Bermuda Triangle. But here's where the story usually gets simplified, and where the real explanation gets left out. The flight's lead instructor was a relatively late transfer to the base, unfamiliar with the specific geography of that part of Florida. Recovered radio transcripts show him convinced he was somewhere over the Florida Keys, hundreds of kilometers from his actual position, leading the flight the wrong way. Weather in the area had also turned rough that afternoon, with strengthening winds and worsening visibility. The official Navy report pointed to pilot disorientation, bad weather, and the fact that the aircraft were known to sink quickly if forced to ditch at sea. As for the rescue plane, it had a well-documented history of fuel vapor buildup that made it prone to mid-air explosions, and a nearby ship reported seeing a fireball at that exact time and place. None of that made headlines the way Vanished Without Explanation did. In 1964, a writer coined the term Bermuda Triangle, grouping together a string of unrelated disappearances into a single, ominous narrative. In 1974, another best-selling book added lost Atlantean technology and unexplained magnetic anomalies, selling millions of copies and cementing the legend for good. But nobody, at the time, checked whether the region actually had an unusually high rate of disappearances. When someone finally did, the numbers told a very different story. In the late 1970s, a librarian named Lawrence Kusch decided to do something nobody else had bothered to do. Go back to the original sources. He pulled Coast Guard records, insurance records, newspaper archives, and original weather reports for every major incident tied to the legend. What he found undercut almost every dramatic claim the triangle had been built on. Some supposedly vanished ships had simply been misstated. Others sank in well-documented storms, with wreckage found exactly where you'd expect. At least one disappearance had happened in a completely different ocean altogether. Inconvenient details, like reports of severe weather, had quietly been dropped with each retelling, until only the mysterious parts remained. Kusch's core argument still holds up today. Compare the number of disappearances to the sheer volume of traffic passing through, and the rate isn't unusual at all. The Bermuda Triangle sits along some of the busiest shipping and flight paths in the world, connecting the U.S. eastern seaboard to the Caribbean and beyond. More traffic naturally means more raw incidents, even if the actual rate of loss per crossing is completely ordinary. The U.S. Coast Guard has stated clearly that it doesn't recognize the triangle as having a disproportionate number of disappearances compared to any other busy stretch of ocean. Lloyd's of London, which has priced maritime risk for centuries, charges no higher premiums for ships crossing the triangle than for comparable routes elsewhere. So what explains the incidents that genuinely did happen there? The honest answer usually comes down to 3 very ordinary factors. First, whether the region sits in the path of the powerful Gulf Stream and squarely within the Atlantic hurricane belt. Second, depth. Much of the triangle sits over trench systems exceeding 8,000 meters, making wreckage extraordinarily hard to find even today. Third, human error. The leading cause of maritime and aviation accidents everywhere on Earth. None of that is nearly as thrilling as lost civilizations or rogue magnetic fields, but it matches what the case files actually say, which raises an obvious question. If the explanation really is this ordinary, why has the legend endured for more than 50 years? So if the numbers don't actually support the legend, and most individual cases have grounded explanations once properly investigated, why does the Bermuda Triangle remain one of the most enduring mysteries in modern pop culture? Part of the answer is simply how good a story it is. A triangle of ocean that swallows ships and planes without explanation is a genuinely compelling narrative hook. It's visual, it's mysterious, and it's easy to summarize in a single sentence. Once writers packaged it that way back in the 1960s in 70 segundos, the story took on a life of its own. It spread through paperback books, late-night television specials, and eventually feature films. Each retelling smoothed over the inconvenient details that would have made the story less exciting. A storm warning that was issued that day, a mechanical fault that was already known, a navigational error that had a name attached to it. Details like that don't survive many retellings, because they don't serve the mystery. There's also a deeper psychological pull at work here, one that has nothing to do with the ocean itself. Human beings are naturally uncomfortable with the idea of a disappearance that has no answer. A ship or plane that seems to be there one moment, and simply isn't the next. No debris, no distress call, no explanation ever recovered. A concrete answer: the storm sank it. The debris field was never located at that depth is somehow less satisfying, emotionally, than an open-ended mystery. Even though the mundane explanation is almost always the one supported by the actual evidence, it also doesn't help that a handful of specific incidents remain genuinely, honestly unresolved. Not because of anything supernatural. Simply because not every case gets solved. The 1918 disappearance of the USS Cyclops is the clearest example. A Navy collier with over 300 people aboard. It remains one of the largest single losses of life in U.S. Navy history without a combat cause. Its wreckage has never definitively been located. Despite repeated searches over the decades, investigators have proposed a combination of overloading, structural issues, and rough weather. But without the wreck itself, the exact cause can't be confirmed with full certainty. That kind of legitimate, acknowledged uncertainty is real, and it's more honest to say so, rather than pretending every case has been neatly closed. But here's the distinction that matters. An unsolved case is not the same thing as evidence for something paranormal. Plenty of ships and aircraft disappear in oceans all over the world. In the Pacific, in the Indian Ocean. In the North Atlantic, far from Bermuda entirely. Wreckage from those losses often goes unfound too, for the same simple reason. The ocean is enormous, frequently extremely deep, and genuinely difficult to search, no matter where you are. The only thing that makes losses inside this particular triangle feel different is 50 years of accumulated storytelling. Storytelling that taught us, in advance, to expect something more from that specific patch of water. So what does that leave us with? Honestly, once the myth is set aside, not a hidden force swallowing ships and planes, not lost technology from a sunken civilization, not sea monsters, and not a magnetic anomaly bending compasses off course. Every one of those specific claims has been tested by research, and none of them has ever held up to actual scrutiny. What's left, instead, is something almost more interesting than the myth itself. It's a case study in exactly how legends get built, step by step. Start with a handful of real, often genuinely tragic incidents. Strip away the inconvenient details, the weather reports, the known mechanical problems, the human error. Packaged what remains into a single, compelling narrative. Repeat that narrative often enough, across enough books and documentaries and late-night specials, and eventually, the story itself becomes more real in the public imagination than the actual, more mundane facts ever were. The Bermuda Triangle isn't really a mystery about the ocean at all. It's a mystery about us, about why we're drawn, again and again, to unexplained disappearances, and about how easily a good story can outrun the truth, especially when the truth involves nothing stranger than bad weather, deep water, and the simple, sobering reality of human error.